here is what we're going to build today. So what I'll do is I'll show you the final product of what we're building today, and then we'll go in and we'll start building it together, and then you're going to spend the rest of the period trying to finish this off. So we have here a proper form, and we have a few tabs. They're empty, but there's screenshots in the lecture slides that show you what to complete, and I'll come back to those in a sec. But just going with the first page, suppose we had like int or float or double, and it'll reference each one of these. It'll tell me the category, the size. Now these aren't working right now for this demo because size is not 8 bits for the double, but you'll fix that up. All right. Range, smallest number to the largest number. We'll show you the code how to do that. Right now the int in this example is working. So the negative 214 ... that tiny number there, that's the smallest, and this is kind of cut off, so you may want to use like a larger text box, maybe multiple line text box to display this. Usage example should pop out a piece of code down here to show me an example of how to use an int. Okay, and value and reference. Let's see, value reference should look like the following. This is what the screenshot is for value versus reference should look like. You should have some sample code that'll run, and the equality one will do the same thing. Have some equalities. Okay, so these screenshots are in the PDF that's uploaded on Slate. Right. So this is what you're looking at. So this is the original page of what we did. So we'll do this. We'll start you off to get this going together, and then you'll finish it off for me for the exercise, for in-class exercise 1. Okay. So first off, let's close this and start off by creating a new project. So we're going to say File, New Project. Yeah, or Control-Shift-N. Windows Forms application. I'm going to call this one W2 Teaching Assistant, and give it a home. So alright, so again, Windows Forms application, give it a name, give it a location, create directory is good, you don't need to source control it, and then just hit OK. But before you do hit OK, make sure this is Visual C# and not any other language. Okay. So it's thinking. Alright, so it starts off with that generic sized square for us. We're going to expand upon it. Okay, so what we're looking at here is our base page, or base form. We're just going to increase the size, widen it out. This may change depending on if we have enough room on the screen, but we'll start with this size. Now, what we want to do is we want to start off by going to our toolbox, and we're going to look for a panel. And we're going to bring that in. Just one sec. Sorry, we're not looking for a panel, we're looking for a tab control. Yeah, not a panel. Got that mixed up. We are looking for a tab control. Further down. It's in alphabetical order, that's the nice thing about it. Oh, right. I forgot about the search. There it is, tab control. Okay, so we'll bring that in. It's a small little square, but let's put it in the top corner. Let's expand that down all the way to the sides, but leave a little bit of gap at the edges so it looks good. The guide bars help you out in that way. Stretch it down, that looks good. But you want to stretch it out. And let's start by configuring this tab panel here. So you'll notice that certain controls here, everything is called a control, first of all, in this world here. Everything's called a control, and some of them have additional properties, like certain things like this. We're going to do a drop-down box, which will have a special name in a moment. There's a list box we're going to get into. These are special things that have additional special properties to it. And you'll notice that there's a little arrow, almost like a play button, right here in the corner. It might be tough to see sometimes. Click on that, it expands, and it has additional controls for us. So we can add extra tabs. So I'm going to add a tab here. So now I have 3 tabs, because we wanted to have 3 tabs in this example here, or this exercise. Now we want to rename it. We have to click on each individual tab. Double clicking doesn't do anything for us, but I'm going to start with tab page 1, and I'm going to rely on my properties here. And what I want to do is look for the text. And change the text from here. I'm also going to give it a name as well. The text here is under something called tab pages, and it's a collection. So if I click on the word collection, you'll see ... and all of a sudden my entire configuration page for the entire set of tabs is here. Alright? And so I also added a new page here using that arrow, but I could have done the same thing here with add and remove. Right? Same thing. The reason for this type of approach is because certain controls that take this type of functionality, or this style of functionality, could be retrieved from a database. So for example, a drop-down menu could be retrieved from a database, and you're going to learn how to do that in future classes. Right? And you're going to find that ASP.NET takes this exact same window for its configuration of certain things and does the exact same thing. Okay? So because we're hard coding things here, we're just going to start by learning how to hard code. So first off, the first page, tab page 1, I can look here for the text. It's called tab page 1. I'm going to change this to the word types. And notice that it changed to types. Now I could also change its ID, right? So change its text, but then look for its ID as well, but I'm going to leave that alone. For tab page 2, look for the text. I'm going to call this one value versus reference. And notice that it changed that at the top as well, out here. And do the same for the third one. Third one is going to say equality. Okay, so types, value versus reference, and equality. Right, so my 3 tabs. And of course I could add or remove tabs here. Right? So there's behavior as well. Data would help me retrieving data from database. Design. So here's the name, which is kind of odd compared to how we changed values in the last exercise, where name was at the top, name is here at the bottom. So we can change that name. So I call it like page 3 or whatever I want, but I'll leave it for now. The reason again for the name change would be to be able to access this in code easily. Okay? So I'll hit OK. And as I click between the 3, I can add items individually to each tab panel. Okay? So we're going to start with types in this exercise. We're going to start by adding a few items. I'm going to start with our simple labels. We're going to need a few labels. I can get used to this search box. So searching for label. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put one here. And because these labels, we're not modifying the following labels that we're adding. There's going to be sort of like text placeholders, IDs, or just to help us navigate. We're going to leave the ID alone, but go straight to the text for these labels. And I'm going to say this one is select a type. It's very tough to see at this angle. Yeah. There. Select the type. I should probably sit down there and actually do this over there. In a future class, I'll do that. Okay, so that's the first label. Bring another label. Put a gap there. This one's going to say category. Two more labels. Each will say size and range. Yeah, probably could. Right. So we have select the type, we have category, size, and range. Okay. So those are just our three labels here. Now, what we want to do is we want to add some text boxes and a drop-down menu. Start with the text boxes. So I'm going to type in the word text and text box. There's a few other fancy ones, but we'll start with text box. And I could extend that a little bit. There's a little arrow here. Let's see what it's saying. Multi-line. If I want a multi-line, I'll say yes to that one because it does get bigger. Maybe we'll stretch it down a bit. Right, so the range seems to encompass a lot of digits there. And then we'll do size, so we'll get a text box for that. Alright, I'll stretch it out a bit there. And let's try copy and paste. That worked as well. Notice I haven't touched any properties yet. Now finally, I want to have a drop-down menu for select a type, right? But it's not called a drop-down here in the C# world. In the ASP.NET world, it is. In the ASP.NET world, it is called a drop-down. But here, it's called a combo box. So I'm going to look for a combo box. I'm going to put that up. And let's line things up nicely. Stretch that out a bit. And if I look at the arrow and I click on the arrow, it says edit items, or it also has this checkbox for use data-bound items. This checkbox is for when we connect to a database and retrieve this information from a database. Okay? We're not going to get to that for another couple of weeks. All right, so we'll leave that alone. We'll go straight to edit items. And what we're going to do is we're going to edit and enter information here. So what we want to do is we want to have like int, float, double, and a couple of other items. So I'll say int, float, double, uint 32, and uint 64. I mean, you could have a bunch of others. So I'm going to start with these just to get going. Okay. Okay. So we have these, and if I hit OK, you really don't see anything in your combo box. Nothing's really changed. They just put those items there. But I'm going to run it and just show you what's happening so far. Okay, so here's what we have so far. All right. Drop down. All of these items are there. Okay. But nothing really happens other than that. In fact, I'm going to make the size of the box a bit bigger as well. Looks pretty small. Okay, so I wanted to make this page a bit bigger because I'm not happy with the size. So I'm going to do that. Oh. It's not letting me resize. Oh. Around here? Oh, right here. Ah, thank you. Okay. There we go. Okay, that's better. In fact, maybe I'll widen it a bit more because I want to have that list. Actually, no, I think that's good enough. That size. No, I'll make it wider. There. There. Okay, so let's move on to the next part. Let's add a little list box over here. Okay, so we're going to look for, in the toolbox, a list box. I haven't changed any properties yet, and I'm going to do that momentarily, but for now, let's just add items to the screen. And click on the little arrow there, edit items, and same idea. I'm going to add these different things, each on a new line. So I'm going to say int, and what I want to do in this box is just say, where did this variable come from? So we like system.int. Next one is float, system.float. Next one is double. Let's use capitals for these. And this is system.double. And then we have other ones, but we'll leave this for now. Okay. And you could keep listing everything that's there. Okay. Now the last thing we're going to add, well, the last couple of things we're going to add through this particular tab is a button and a text box. So we'll start with looking for a button. Add a simple button down here. Center about there. And this button is going to say usage example. Okay. And we're going to add a text box. Another text box here. And we want it to be multi-line. So we're going to stretch it down. There we go. And just to show you what it looks like, let's just run this again. So this is what we have. Nothing works, but except for the combo box. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to go in and start editing some of these widgets that we added here. So I'm going to take this away. And let's start by actually naming our items here. Okay. So we could start by taking our tab panel, renaming this. Its default is tab control 1. We might call it tab main. Right? We might call this tab main. Okay. Our combo box, it might be called tab main. Yeah. So our combo box, call it, instead of combo box 1, call it CMB type. Okay. Category, call it TB category for the text because it's text box, or TXT, call it TB. Okay. Size will be TB size. Yeah, I TXT, but I use TB all the way. Like those are just guidelines essentially. So they recommend you use like TXT or FRM for form or whatnot. Out of habit, I use TB for text box, spanning different languages. So I'm gonna call it just TB. So this category, or sorry, range 1, this will be TB range. Okay. CMB type. Yeah, CMB type. CMB for combo, and then type. Okay. Okay. For the list box, call it LST options. For the button, BTN usage. Finally, for the last text box, TB usage. Right? But the idea is that you want to rename all the names or all the IDs for every item here to be related to what that item's all about. Right? So this is a usage button, so BTN usage. This is a text box for the usage details, so TB usage. LST list options, range, size, category, type. Right? So different things available out there. Okay. And again, if I run it, nothing new, no changes. Okay? No changes. Okay. So we'll just do a couple more items, then we'll stop here. So first thing, for our button, so for the button, remember from the last time around, we just double click on the button, it generates our event handler. So we'll generate an event handler, but I'm not going to do anything with the event handler right now. I'll leave that for you guys. You're going to use this event handler to populate that text box, right, with an example. And you can come up with any example you want, right? Just make up an example just to populate this text box. But what I want to turn your attention to today is this drop down. You may have noticed in the example, or the full example that we did at the beginning, every time I selected something from this combo box, it changed and updated information here, right? So I need to have an event handler for this combo box. So the way we do it is by double clicking. and it generates an event handler, CMB type selected index changed. Right? Just by double clicking on this combo box. Okay? So now an event handler has been associated to that combo box. Okay? And we'll prove the existence or the use of this combo box here. First thing we're going to do is figure out which item was selected. Okay? So what we're going to say here is int SCL index is equal to CMB type, which is the name of our combo box, dot selected index. Now, before I autocomplete this, I'm going to use selected index. I just want to turn your attention to something else. There's also selected text, selected value as well. So these selected value you might find more of a use when we get to databasing. We want to know the value that was chosen, right? Selected index is just 0 to n minus 1. That's what it's all about. Okay? So I'm going to choose select index. I just want to know 0 to n minus 1 for this exercise here. Okay? So this alone will tell me what was selected. Okay? Now, let's take this and edit the list items box, or let's get the list item box to do something. Okay? So the thing about the list item, in fact, if I run it one more time, just to show you what I'm talking about, the list box that we had on the side is selectable. Like we put all of these items in here, they're selectable. So we want to, if I choose something from here, I want it to appear here. I want it to highlight one of these. Okay. Now, what I want to do here is basically say lst options dot selected index is equal to cell index. Or I could have just directly taken it and set it equal, right? But I might reuse this cell index afterwards. All right? Okay, so if I run this, let's see what happens here. So I'm going to choose int, and I chose this int. I'm going to choose float, it chose this float. Choose double, it chose that double. But there's a problem though, because I only have 3 items here, but I have like 5. Let's see what happens here. I'll choose the last one. Nothing yet, but here we go. So here we go. This is how Microsoft Visual Studio tells us when an exception has been thrown. It basically throws a breakpoint up, stops it right here, gives me an explanation. A range out of index out of bounds exception was unhandled. All right. So really, this would go inside a try catch statement to be handled. Or let's fix it and line it up nicely with the other items. Right. I'll leave that for you guys to finish off. But this is an example of how we have an exception being thrown. This is when an error pops up. This is what it looks like for Visual Studio. It's not overly confusing. It's not awful. Xcode is very confusing for the Mac when you look at exceptions being thrown there or any issues that pop up there. But here, it's actually telling you argument out of range exception was unhandled. All right, tells you a bit invalid argument value of 4 not valid for selected index. All right, it'll even give you some options for help. Okay. So now I'm stuck here. So I can just hit the stop button, stop, and try and work on the code and fix it up. But I'll leave that for another day. Okay. So, one other thing I could show you is that, if you wanted to unhighlight something, you can set to -1. In fact, that's what we'll do here. We'll handle this issue by saying if cell index is less than 3, because we have 3 items here, we'll do this. Otherwise, lst options dot selected index is equal to -1. If I set it to -1, it unhighlights everything. If I try that again, just to show you what I mean. So there's that. Unselects it. Okay, so you can use -1 to unselect everything. Okay, so I'll select something else, like I'll do a float. So I chose float, float was highlighted. If I choose like the last one again, it unhighlights float, right? Because I set it to -1. Okay, so selected index is -1. You can never really have a negative selected index, right? So what it does is it just unhighlights. But if you go greater than n-1, then you have an issue. Okay, just a couple more things and we'll call it a day here for this exercise. So if I want to edit the text for a text box, right, then I would just use the text variable. So let's say tb category dot text is equal to, we'll say it's a value type. Let's do a little bit of math and try and figure out sizes and ranges and stuff like that. So let's just pick on the int. So we'll say, and you could finish this off for the other one. So we'll say if cell index is 0, which means it's an int, then what we'll do is we'll find out the size of that int. So we'll say tb size dot text is equal to, well, I want to know the size of the int. I want to know how many bits it is. And really what I can say here is size of int. Now there's an issue with that. But this is what I'm going for here. If I use size of, right, size of, and this size of also exists in C, this will tell me how many bits there are in the int, or in the float, or the double, whatever type I pass in. Because I can pass in size of float, size of double, and so on. Even size of class, like any class that you have, you can pass in a size. That tells you how many bytes or how many bits there are, right? But the problem is this is a number, and I want to save it as a string. So I have to use another method to convert it to a string. So I can use convert with a capital C dot toString and pass in these items, or this item here. Now it's happy with it. Okay. And if I want to do the range, so now I also want to find the biggest and the smallest int. So if I want to know the biggest value, I'm using int.maxValue, right? If I want to know the smallest value, it's int.minValue. Okay? But now I want to turn this into a string to say min value, and then let's say like comma, and then max value. And I want to turn that into a string. So what I'm going to say is tb range.text is equal to, and I'll just take min value, so this has to be converted, so convert.toString, and then I'll put this on a new line so it's readable, plus with a comma, and then plus convert.toString, and take that max value. Okay. If I run this, so I'll just put this down here while you guys are still looking at it. So if I choose int, so value type, it's got 4 bytes actually. So it's telling me how many bytes there are, not bits. And its range. So -214 to +214. And that's the minimum max value. Right? If you look at float, double, they still don't do anything, like nothing's been updated, it just takes the last value. We still have to do this for the other ones. In fact, let's just finish it off. We'll finish off this part at least. Okay, and then you guys can finish off the rest. Okay. Okay, so let's do the other options that are available to us here. So we're going to say else if SCL index is 1. All right. Then I'll just do the TB size for this. So we'll say TB size dot text is equal to convert dot toString for size of, and yeah, essentially you just copy paste this. But for index 1, we're dealing with float. And then I'll do the rest. Right, so index 2, this was a double. Index 3, this was a uint32. Uint32 has a capital, and uint64. Okay, and in fact, let's just populate the range as well. So let's take the range. For the remaining. Okay, and oh, this should be SCL equals 4. And I think we can try this out again. If I bring this over, so I'll start with choosing int, float, double is 8 bytes there compared to float. uint32 is back to 4 bytes. uint64. Notice that the uint start at 0 and go up to those larger numbers. Okay, and essentially there's more to this exercise that you can take the notes and you can actually go ahead and try and finish it off based on the screenshots from the slides. And for here, at least what we've done now is we got used to Windows Forms again. This time we created an event handler for the combo box. We looked into some code and we learned how to do a size of. We learned how to convert from ints, floats, doubles to strings, join strings together, deal with getting the selected index for the combo box, and that's all.